Hello friends, in this video lecture we are going to learn about the spinal cord and the spinal nerves and its functions. Coming to the spinal cord is a long, slender bundle of neurons that comes at the descends from brain through descending tracts or projecting tracts. So coming to the spinal cord, which it consists of neural controls or neural circuits that controls the quickest actions to the environmental changes. We call them as reflexes. And it also acts as a site of integration of neural stimulation that arises locally or from peripheral nervous system and from the brain. So whatever the stimulus that is going from the body parts to the brain or from brain to body parts, so called sensory and motor impulses respectively are integrated in the spinal cord and also acts as relay station. Relay station means where it was analyzed. Means, for example, if there is any touch on our body, sense of touch on our body, it integrates. It relays means it initiates a reflex action at once, and at the same time it also sends impulses to the brain for the motor activity. So here it stays for a few milliseconds where it converts the sensory impulse into reflex impulse, and at the same time it also sends to brain for motor impulse. So that is called relaying of sensory impulses. And it also and it is the continuation of the brain and together constitute the central nervous system. So here this is the structure that we see for spinal cord. The anatomy. Coming to the anatomy of spinal cord, has coverings as a brain has. They are called as spinal meninges, and it also has cerebrospinal fluid. But this particular cerebrospinal fluid, which is present in spinal cord, in the center of the spinal cord, flowing through central canal, whereas in the brain it is flowing through the space between dura and arachnoid membrane. Arachnoid membrane and pia mater. And denticulate ligaments. Denticulate ligaments are the thick ligaments of the pia mater which fuse with the arachnoid mater and inner surface of the dura mater between the anterior and posterior roots of spinal nerves on either side, means which helps to hold the spinal nerves while they are moving out of the spinal cord. And coming to the meninges. Meninges, as we already studied, like in the brain there are three meninges. They are outer dura mater, which has a dense irregular connective tissue, and the space in it is protected by means of a cushion of fat and connective tissue located in the epidural space, which is the space between dura mater and the wall of the vertebral canal. The middle layer or middle singular meninx, is a vascular covering of arachnoid membrane because of its spider's web arrangement of its collagenous fibers we call it as arachnoid membrane. And the third one is pia mater, and the space between dura mater and arachnoid mater or arachnoid membrane is called as subdural space, where it consists of interstitial fluid for the nourishment of these meninges. And the innermost meninx is called as pia mater, which is a thin transparent connective tissue which adheres to the spinal cord and also the brain. Here you can see the different three layers of the spinal cord, meninges of the spinal cord. So here it is the spinal cord and a spinal nerves that comes out of the spinal cord. And coming to the anatomy, in detail, we have two sections: external anatomy and internal anatomy. External anatomy helps us to find out the location of spinal nerves and how it was arranged, whereas internal anatomy shows us how the nerves are arranged or grouped inside the spinal cord. So the external anatomy, the total length of the spinal cord is around 40 to 45 centimeters, and the diameter is around 2 centimeters, which is placed in the vertebral canal present in the vertebral discs. It has an enlargement called as cervical enlargement, where the most of the spinal nerves comes out of it, which extends from fourth cervical vertebra to first thoracic vertebra. Coming to here, we have regions like cervical region, thoracic region, lumbar region, and sacral region. So the nerves that comes out of these particular regions are named by them as cervical nerves, cervical spinal nerves, thoracic spinal nerves, lumbar spinal nerves, and sacral spinal nerves. Here, the cervical enlargement extends from fourth to first thoracic vertebrae, and the inferior enlargement means second enlargement, from where a maximum number of many spinal nerves will come out of it. It is called as spinal enlargement, which extends from 9th to 12th thoracic vertebra. 9th to 12th thoracic vertebra. And continuation to the lumbar enlargement, the spinal cord terminates, means it ends as a tapering structure and conical structure. We call it as a conus medullaris. It ends at the level of first and second lumbar vertebrae, L1 and L2, and from there we'll have a tail-like structure or a hair-like structure. We call it as a phylum terminale. Phylum terminale is the sacral part of the nerves which moves out of the spinal cord and enters into the lower parts of our body. Coming to the internal anatomy of the spinal cord. Internal anatomy of the spinal cord, it consists of two types of matters. We call them as gray matter and white matter. The outermost matter is called as white matter, which consists of myelinated axons of sensory neurons, intraneurons, and motor neurons, whereas the gray matter, which consists of cell bodies of the neurons and neuroglia of unmyelinated axons and the dendrites of interneurons and motor neurons. The gray matter of the spinal cord, which is present in the spinal cord, which looks like a H-shaped structure or butterfly-shaped structure, and the white matter is divided into there is a two groove-like structures which divides the entire spinal cord into two parts, left and right parts, and those two grooves are anterior median fissure, which is a wide groove, whereas the posterior one is called as posterior median sulcus, which is a narrow groove, which these two divides the entire spinal cord into left and right regions. And the gray commissures forms the crossbar, means in gray matter there is a connection between left and right which makes the H shape, so that is called as a gray commissure, and it has a small canal passing through it which consists of cerebrospinal fluid. And the gray matter on each side of the spinal cord is again divided into horns. We call them as horns. These horns, which consists of various nuclei, and these horns are three types. What are they means? They are anterior side. We call them as anterior or ventral grey horns, and the second one is posterior or dorsal grey horns, and sidewise we call them as lateral grey horns. Anterior gray horns, which consists of somatic motor nuclei, means clusters of cell bodies of somatic motor neurons. Posterior gray horns, which consists of cell bodies and axons of interneurons as well axons of incoming sensory neurons. The lateral gray horns, which are present only in thoracic and upper lumbar and sacral segments of the spinal cord, means we cannot see these lateral horns in the cervical region. These consist of cell bodies of autonomic, means peripheral nervous system, motor nuclei, and regulates the activities of smooth muscle, cardiac muscle, and glands. See, here you can see here, these are the grooves which separates the entire spinal cord into left and right parts, and the gray matter which is in H-shaped structure, and the middle one is called as gray commissure. And these are the spinal nerves that comes out of the spinal cord, and these are called as spinal ganglions, and these are the horns. So this is anterior side and this is posterior side. And internal anatomy of the spinal cord. So the white matter, like gray matter, it is organized into regions. So the anterior to the gray regions is called as white commissure, which connects the white matter of the both left and right sides of the spinal cord. So here the exact histology, how it looks like in a human body. So coming to the connective tissues covering the spinal nerves. Spinal nerve fiber is nothing but a bundle of neurons, and nerve means bundle of nerve fibers. So here we see different layers that connects the nerves and nerve fibers. Each nerve fiber which is connected by means of covered by means of a connective tissue called as endoneurium. Endoneurium, which is consists of a mesh of collagen fibers, fibroblasts, and macrophages surrounded by endoneurial fluid, which is an extracellular fluid which is derived from capillary tubes, which nourishes the spinal nerves outside the body, outside the spinal cord. And the second layer, a thick sheet of connective tissue called as perineurium, which packages the group of nerve fibers. Means endoneurium means it covers only nerve fibers, and a group of nerve fibers, like in the muscle cells, like in the which forms fasciculus. Muscle bundles into fasciculus. Likewise here nerve fibers into fasciculi, and the layer is called as perineurium, which consists of almost 15 sheets or 15 layers of fibroblasts, which forms the collagenous sheets around the spinal nerves. And coming to the reflex and reflex arcs. Reflexes and reflex arcs are the most prominent functions of spinal cord. So about reflex, the second way of spinal cord, which promotes the homeostasis by serving as an integrating center of some reflexes. By the way, what do you mean by a reflex? A reflex is a fast, involuntary, unplanned sequence of actions that occurs in response to a particular stimulus. And some reflexes are inborn, means, while the other are learned or acquired. Inborn means closing of our eyelids to the light stimulus, or any other threatening stimulus. Whereas the removal of hand over the heat, they are called as learned reflexes. We call them as conditional reflexes and unconditional reflexes respectively. The integration, how the integration takes place. So when the integration takes place, the spinal cord gray matter, we the reflex when the reflex integration the reflex action, which is an integral part, integration of the impulses which takes place in the spinal gray matter, because it consists of interneurons. So the sensory neurons which enters into the spinal cord into the gray matter, and there the interneurons are present. From the interneurons they analyzes and sensory reflexes back to the back to the organs through motor neurons. And there are some reflexes which are arised from brain. We call it as cranial reflex. And somatic reflexes involve contraction of smooth muscles, whereas autonomic reflex are generally involuntary, like increase of heart rate, movement of intestines, increase in respiration, etc. So the components of reflex arc. Reflex arc, which consists of spinal sensory receptor, from which sensory stimulus are received by the nerves and generated into the spinal cord, transmitted into the spinal cord. And the sensory neuron is the one which carries the sensory impulses from sensory receptors to spinal cord and brain. Whereas integrating center is one or more regions that are present in the gray matter, that too in the lateral horns of the gray matter in this CNS, which acts as integrating center, means which mixes or integrates the different types of sensory impulses. Motor neurons are the neurons which carry the motor impulses from the body, either from the spinal cord or from the brain. And the effector is the body, a part of the body that responds to the motor stimulus. Here we can see an example of patellar reflex, patellar reflex and plantar reflexes. Patellar reflexes, here we can test it by tapping the tendon of the patella. So when we tap the patellar tendon, it acts as the sensory receptor. The receptor is present at the tendon, near the tendon of the patella. It sends the impulses through the spinal cord to the parts of the spinal cord. So through sensory receptors, the sensory impulses pass it through the sensory ganglion, spinal ganglion, and to the spinal cord, gray matter of the spinal cord. And from integrating neurons or interneurons, the impulses which are transmitted to motor neurons, and the motor neurons which comes and activates the muscle bundles present in the thigh region, which lifts the lower leg. So which performs this particular entire action in seconds. So that is the patellar reflex and spinal cord, its anatomy and its functions. Thank you.